Broke, desperate, and forgotten by the world, Russel Raymond had hit rock bottom. Once a nobleman's son and a student at a prestigious magic academy, he had been cast out, labeled a failure for his inability to control mana. His father's death and the Empire's war left him with nothing. No title, no future, only a strange ring embedded with a dragon's eye. To survive, Russel wandered as a mercenary, but when even that failed, he took the lowest of jobs, cleaning dust in an old museum. Buried beneath time and ash, he discovered the skeleton of an ancient dragon, and its still beating heart. As he reached out, the ring on his hand trembled. In a flash, the dragon awakened its soul, calling to his end. Just like that, time shattered. Russel awoke back at the academy, back when everything had just begun. But this time, he carried the power of a dragon. In an instant he is regressed back in time. He can faintly hear his teacher shouting angrily at him, followed by the unmistakable sound of a book slamming directly over his head. He jolts back to attention as the teacher berates him for napping in class like that. Of course, Russel has no clue what the hell is going on, or why Professor Hubert is suddenly haunting him. After all, as far as he remembers, Hubert already passed away. He glances around curiously, looking left and right at the students, then down at himself. It doesn't take him long to realize he's somehow been sent back to the past. Meanwhile, Hubert kicks him out of the class as a punishment. Russel, on the other hand, still has no idea what kind of magic could have triggered his regression. Now that he thinks about it, he is sure that it must be the doing of that dragon who talked to him. Then he notices his ring is missing, which makes him wonder for a moment if his mother might have something to do with this. Right at that moment, the teacher comes out of the class. Even though our boy apologizes for his mistake, the teacher isn't satisfied with it and invites him to the office for a one-on-one meeting. Although Russel is in trouble, he is actually liking this feeling. But he soon gets a solid slap to the back of his head. Of course, it's a group of classic bullies here to mess with our boy. One of them, a guy with blonde hair, decides to slap Russel too. But his friend stops him because the professors are watching. Russel recognizes the blonde guy as Coma Frederick. Frederick then shoots him a death glare and orders him to follow them to the bathroom if he values his life. With that, they walk off, while Russel just feels exhilarated once again to finally get a chance to experience all of this. Suddenly, his notification system prompts him to teach these bullies a hard lesson. In return, he'll earn a magic stone. Russel isn't sure what kind of illusion this is, but before he can figure it out, Frederick calls out to him again, telling him to follow them, or he can try running away. Either way, they wouldn't mind, since these guys are clearly asking for it. Russel makes up his mind and decides to teach them a lesson before doing anything else. After several years of living the mercenary life, the shallow threats and death glares Frederick gives him are nothing compared to the terror he felt when facing down monsters. In comparison, these guys are like cute teddy bears you can cuddle with. Anyway, once they're in the bathroom, Frederick throws a sassy jab at Russel, but my guy responds with the same energy, calling him a bedbug bastard. The trio is bewildered to see him exuding this unshakable confidence. But they're not here to take any crap. The most eager of the bunch balls up his fist to punch, but Russel whizzes past him and delivers a devastating punch that knocks the guy out cold. The second one, seeing his friend go down, charges at Russel as well, but he too gets rocked with a punch that's strong enough to knock him out in one hit. Even then, this isn't enough to scare Frederick. In fact, he's getting more cocky. He throws his smoke pipe aside and prepares to fight. He throws a jab at Russel while mocking him, saying that since Russel can't use magic, he's learned some cheap martial arts. This, he claims, is to be expected from a fallen family. Frederick then slips 4 rings onto his fingers, reminding Russel that while magic is forbidden, small artifacts are allowed. With that, he launches himself at Russel, but my guy just grabs the fist coming his way, twists his wrist, and watches Frederick's knees buckle in pain. Russel's cold glare shakes Frederick to his core, and he's livid that someone like Frederick would dare mention his family name. With one final punch, Russel takes care of the bastard. Once he is done drilling the hard lesson to these bullies, Russel leaves the bathroom and sits against the wall on the floor, wondering if he went a little overboard. Right at that moment, the system notification materializes before him, and he receives the lowest grade magic stone as promised. As soon as the stone is in his hand, the system tells him to consume it. While Russel is not sure if he's really supposed to eat it, he believes that this must be another opportunity that's mixed in with being given a chance to live life the second time. He starts to chew the stone, and he realizes it tastes really nice. Suddenly, a red energy called mana starts to appear around his body. The energy soon envelops him, and it freaks him out. The screen notifies him that he has obtained the mana contained within the stone. Suddenly he feels a sensation coming from his chest, and he's still freaked out. Our guy suddenly realizes what's happening, and he places his hands on his chest to stabilize himself. He realizes that the mana he consumed is flowing out, so he calms down so it can do its thing. The screen comes back and tells him that the mana in the circle is increasing. The mana isn't just increasing, the mana he received is being absorbed by the magic circle around his heart. He remains calm and is glad that it's finally stabilizing. Our guy suddenly grins because it looks like he's hit a jackpot. With this new method, he can finally overcome the mana vein narrowing that he has always dreaded. He thinks about the fall of his family, and then his expulsion from the academy. As if those experiences weren't bad enough, he had to settle as a third-rate mercenary. Finally, it looks like he can change the future that he has foreseen. He paces through the hall with a newfound joy, and it looks like things are looking bright. Moments later, Russell knocks on Professor Hubert's door, and he's told to come in. He walks into the room and the old man tells him to sit. Russell sits down dejected, and the professor calls his name the way elderly people do when you get into trouble. Professor Hubert tells him that he's not his usual self today. To help solve the problem, he continues by suggesting what the problem could be. He asks Russell if he's going through something difficult. The professor informs him that he heard a rumor that his classmates are bullying him, and he wonders if that's the cause. Russell recalls his fond memories with Professor Hubert in his past life, and he recalls how he never gave up on him. He finally smiles when it's his turn to respond, and he remembers that he always wanted to say this. So he informs the professor that there's no need to worry. The old man is shocked by his words, and Russell thanks him for asking. The professor coughs and states that it is his job as a professor to take care of his students. He adds that, however, because he'll get punished because he dozed off in class today. The professor opens the book in front of him and tells him the punishment won't be an easy one. He's given an assignment to write an analytical report on a part of their textbook. Apparently, it's a section that even those in the upper years struggle with. While he speaks, the screen pops up again and announces to him that his new mission is to complete Professor Hubert's assignment. The system informs him that he can get additional rewards depending on the level of completion and Professor Hubert's level of satisfaction. The reward is another lowest grade mana stone plus some mysterious thing. Russell's eyes widen when he realizes that even completing assignments are missions. The professor notices his eyes widening, so he asks him if the assignment is too difficult. Russell tells him it's not, so he thanks the professor. Later, Russell completes the assignment after a few hours. He thinks to himself that the assignment isn't as difficult as it was made to look. In his previous life, he used to study the theoretical part of magic really hard because he was hopeless at using mana practically. But there is something else to pay attention to in this new life. There's something else that's just as important as studying. That thing is called mana vein training. Russell remembers one of his jobs as a mercenary where he's escaping from a monster. He explains that the mana vein is the path that circulates mana. Mana is absorbed through breathing. Mana is also circulated through the mana veins and is collected at the heart. In the flashback, the monster closes in on our hero. The monster smashes one of its large claws on the ground, and Russell quickly jumps out of the way. While he's running, he turns back and notices that the monster is coming to attack him again. He explains that the reversal of mana flow out of the body is called magic. In the flashback, he does some circle magic and releases some fire out of his hands. It's a great deal of fire, and the fire envelopes the monster. The thing is that the stronger your mana veins, the more mana you can collect and the faster you can release it. After the fire clears out, the monster is obviously unscathed. It seems that he couldn't release a fire that's strong enough to hurt it. He realizes he's cooked, so he tries to generate a shield to block the monster's next attack. Before he can complete the chant to cast the spell, he feels a sudden impact. The monster quickly gives him a sucker punch with its tail. The monster finally moves forward to finish him off. Still in the flashback, Russell explains that his sickness made fighting monsters an absolute nightmare. He remains in the rock, slightly unconscious. Suddenly he regains his consciousness. He's quickly met by another hit by the monster that launches him deeper into the hollow stone. He wonders if the skies sympathized with his unlucky fate or if it could just have been luck. The thing is, that fall launched him into an underground site. When he gets up, he groans and tries to find his way out. Inside this site, he finds two grimoires containing strange secrets. Our guy walks towards the books and goes to pick them up. The first book is called Overvain, and the other is called Wizard Body. Back in the present, Russell goes on a jog to continue his mana vein training. He explains that the book named Overvain trains the physical body and broadens one's mana vein. The other book called Wizard Body teaches you trainings that help substitute your muscle tissue for a part of the mana vein. In other words, the stronger your body gets, the more firm your mana vein gets. Russell recalls that the change he experienced doing this as an adult wasn't so much, but since he's in his growing stages now, he'll be able to see greater results. Our guy trains vehemently, determined to overcome mana vein narrowing this time. Shortly after the sun starts to set while he's still training, our hero goes to rest near a tree and he confesses that he can't go on anymore. He gives himself a pat on the back that this much training should be enough for his training regime for one day. Suddenly the screen appears again and notifies him that the mission to practice the ancient skill called overvein requires him to run 5 kilometers, but he's only done 0.05 out of 5. The reward of going 5 kilometers is that the speed improvement resulting from practicing the skill will increase. Russel winces after reading the notification. To give him an incentive, the system notifies him that while practicing overvein, he can repeat this mission once a day. The system also adds that based on how he improves, the distance that's required each time will increase. Lastly, after he reaches a certain level of overvein, the mission will no longer appear. Russel becomes alarmed and asks the system what the rush is. The notification sounds like a threat, so he decides to train. He reasons that he barely managed to obtain such an opportunity, so he can't just sit still and let it pass him by. Shortly after, our guy pushes further and goes 1.4 kilometer out of 5. He goes further and does 2.7 kilometer out of 5. At this point his legs begin to shake. It gets to a point that he has to take a break because it feels like he's broken his knee. He checks the screen and notices he's gone 3.6 kilometers, so he comforts himself that he's almost done. He decides to give it one last push. With all his remaining strength, our boy runs like a madman to meet the target. Late at night, he finally sees the notification that he has completed the mission and there are rewards for it. He lies on the ground and he feels like he'll die if he takes another step. The great achievement makes him smile, and he wonders how he's going to walk back to the dorm. The next morning, Professor Hubert goes through Russell's report, and he can't believe his eyes based on how in-depth it is. He looks up at Russell and asks him if he's sure he was the one who prepared the report. Our guy gives a sly smile and affirms that he did it himself. The professor notices his confidence. Professor Hubert finally speaks and tells him he's very satisfied with his report. Suddenly the screen pops up again and notifies him he has completed the mission, and he'll now receive a reward. His rewards are another lowest grade mana stone and an additional gem of the same size. He also receives increased understanding of the art of summoning beasts. Because of this increased understanding, he'll get an increase in power, a decrease in mana consumption, and reduced casting time. Russell realizes that the higher his level of understanding becomes, the stronger he becomes. He quickly decides to leverage on that. The professor commends his work and tells him he can take his leave now. Before he leaves, Russell decides to ask the professor a favor. Moments after Russell has asked the favor, the professor asks him why he would want to use the faculty library. The man mentions that the student library should have enough books to suit all of his needs. Our boy informs the professor that he's read all the books in the student library. That sounds hard to believe, so the professor asks if he's really read all of them, to which Russell replies affirmatively. His teacher says that's shocking to hear. However, he says that even if he's being truthful, it's an entirely different matter to allow him to use the faculty library. The professor tells him that he'll put him through tests to ensure if he's qualified for that. Russell lights up and agrees that that is totally understandable. Shortly after, several mission windows pop up, all requesting that our guy complete each assignment that the professor gave him to get the rewards. While he's out running, he thinks about how many assignments the professor gave him, and reasons that he's quite a picky man. Considering that the better one can understand theory, the stronger their magic, our boy decides that it will be worth it. He determines to get access to the advanced level knowledge in the faculty at all costs. Eventually he considers that he'll also get a mana stone from each mission, so it's like killing two birds with one stone. While he's enjoying his drink of water, someone walks up to him and calls his full name. The boy's name is Anton Frederick, and he seems to be related to Coma. Anton mentions that Coma, his friend, had to suffer because of him. Russell sharply retorts by asking what's wrong with that, and he asks if Anton is here for revenge. Anton laughs and says there's no point in coming here to take revenge against him, and his friends laugh with him. He tells Russell to stop deluding himself. He jokes that no one would take revenge on a worthless piece of shit like him. Anton tells him that he'd rather trample him than take revenge here. The bully walks past him and intentionally collides with him, reminding him that they'll meet in class. Russell remembers that they have class soon, and he wonders why Anton is so smug about it. He suddenly recalls that the class they have together is Practical Magic Combat Studies, where students are graded based on their sparring matches with each other. The bad part about it is that in his fights against Anton in his past life, he was always humiliated in that class. He recalls Anton always beating him at fire magic and towering over him. He would grin and make fun of him because he doesn't have good mana veins. Russell can't believe he had foolishly forgotten that they have to do those. Our boy decides that he has to quickly start preparing for it. Better late than never. Suddenly, the screen notifies him that he has a new mission to achieve the second circle by increasing the level of understanding of the attributes that he currently possesses. That day, Russell spends all this time doing each and every assignment the professor gave him, and he works into the night. The next morning, he brings a pile of papers to the professor's office to submit the assignments. The system shows several notifications for each assignment and tells him that he has completed his mission and will now receive his reward. That evening, Russell returns to the dorm after a day well spent and decides to check out his rewards. He looks at about 10 mana stones that the system gave him, and he contemplates what to do with them. A growing uncertainty rises within him as he picks them up. He wonders if his body's mana load will be able to handle several mana stones at once without causing adverse effects. Eventually, he seems to accept his fate and proceeds to take the stones. He tells himself that he'd have to trust the training he's been going through for so long. A few seconds later, our boy tosses all 10 stones in his mouth and chews them up. For a short while, nothing happens. Moments later, the mana from the stones is released, and his body is suddenly enveloped by the mana. It becomes more pronounced, and the entire room is consumed by a bright light. He suddenly begins to feel like his body is burning. To absorb the mana towards his heart, he quickly makes a path into his mana veins. Russell starts to create a path to mold the flow of the mana. He continues to direct the flow of the mana to channel it to his heart. It's clear that he's in some pain, but he decides to bear it. Furthermore, he starts to twirl the mana flow around to draw a new circle around his heart like the first one he has so he can achieve a second circle. If he fails at doing this properly, his heart won't be able to make it. Our boy carefully draws the second circle but hesitates before he reaches the end, afraid that he'll mess something up. He decides that there's no going back, so he decides to finish it up. His veins begin to absorb the generated mana once he concentrates and completes the circle. Our boy refuses to give up no matter the consequence. There's no way he can achieve his dream of being a world-class mage without doing this, so he promises himself to achieve a second circle. Suddenly, a bright beam of light bursts out through his window, and it looks like he's exploding. Moments later, Russell wakes up on the ground, and he realizes that he was able to do it successfully. He realizes that he's finally achieved the second circle. Finally, the mana flows into his body while he lays on the ground. Suddenly, the system notifies him that he has completed the mission and will now receive rewards. Apparently, his understanding of the elemental attributes has risen greatly, so the power of each elemental magic has also risen greatly. The next morning, the professor reads through all of the reports that Russell submitted to him. He exclaims in amazement and confesses that he can't believe that he was able to complete all those tasks in a short period. The professor tells him that there's one last question before he can grant him access. It's a question that is more fundamental compared to the previous ones. The professor asks which of the structures is the most important among the 4 structures that magic is comprised of. The question shocks Russell, who just stands there in silence. Professor Hubert notices his silence and starts to regret asking a student a question that he himself has recently just figured out. To avoid overwhelming him, the professor quickly gets up and proposes to ask a different question. Russell, who was silent all along, starts to answer the question anyway. The professor is taken aback by Russell's confidence. Shocked that he has an answer, Professor Hubert stops talking and listens to him. Russell finally answers that the most important structure in magic is the mental image of the one performing magic. The professor hesitates for a moment and considers the answer he gave. Professor Hubert finally asks him why he thinks that is so. Russell thinks deeply about the question before he speaks. He says that magic is manifesting something into the real world using mana. The world categorizes this process into 4 different levels. The first level is known as assimilation, where you learn the principles that guide natural phenomena. The second step is creating a mental image, where you visualize what you've learned in your mind. The third step is called construction, where you construct formulas in order to manifest the visual image. The final part is manifestation, where the magic comes to exist in the real world through the formula. Russell adds that understanding construction and manifestation can be learned through enough effort and studying. However, mental image is not something that can be reached through effort. Breaking out of one's limits and reaching freedom of imagination through courage is what decides the level of mental images. Our boy holds out his hands and generates a flame to explain his point. He explains that he can choose to pretend that this flame is an arrow and visualize that in his mind. If he does that, the flame will become the second circle magic fire arrow. True to his words, the flame in his hands morphs itself into the form of an arrow. Next, he says that he can also choose to imagine something else. Apparently, the flame will follow his imagination and will become something entirely different. He says that he doesn't have to place a limit on his mental visualization, because doing that can allow him to create something that doesn't exist in this world. The professor just listens keenly and affirms all that he has said. Russell says that it all begins with understanding how the world ends, and then twisting the rules of the world to achieve something beautiful. Russell puts out the flames and confidently ends his explanation. Professor Hubert, who has been listening all along, thinks about how remarkable Russell seems to have become. He finally speaks and says he's been able to confirm what he's been thinking. The professor smiles at him and says that the student library is too small a world for him, Suddenly, the system notifies our boy that he has accomplished the mission of gaining entry into the first floor of the professor's library, and he'll get 2 low-grade mana stones. Later that day, Russell walks into the first floor of the professor's library, only the first floor seems to be pretty expansive, which he finds intriguing. To him, this is very different from the student library. He quickly starts digging through the books and finds a few. He goes to have a seat and starts reading through the books. To him, these books are more practical than what they usually have access to. Suddenly, a woman steps into the library and watches Russell from behind. She finally exclaims to get his attention, and she tells him that he's reading quite an interesting book. Russell is shocked to hear her voice, and he realizes he's not alone. He quickly drops the book and turns around. Oddly, he doesn't see anyone, and it turns out that the woman has somehow disappeared to his front, and she signals him to look forward. She is dressed like a mage, and Russell recognizes her. The woman smiles at him, and he recognizes her as Daria Snow White, the master of the Flame Tower. He quickly greets her and introduces himself. Russell immediately becomes uncomfortable in her presence. This is because she is in the realm of the 8th circle, which not many in the world have been able to reach. Despite being over the age of 80, she uses an incredible amount of mana to maintain her youthful appearance. She is the master of the best-ranking magic tower of the Red Tower faction called the Flame Tower. Daria is surprised to learn that he knows her. She brings out a large lollipop out of nowhere, and she quickly puts him at ease, telling him there's no need to be nervous. Wondering how a student was able to gain access to the professor's library, she turns around and asks him. Russell informs her that Professor Hubert had allowed him to use the library. Daria exclaims softly, and asks if an uptight man like Professor Hubert really allowed him to use the library. Our boy starts to grin when he realizes that the professor can be a bit uptight in truth. She mentions that it makes sense, and it explains why he was learning something quite interesting when she came in. The woman scans him with her eyes and notices that he has extremely pure mana, and senses that his mana distribution is very stable too. She glances back at him and mutters that it's rare to find someone like him. Daria walks past him and tells him not to worry. To ease his tension, she assures him that she's not here to lecture him or get in his way. Russell bows again and thanks her for her kind words. Daria suddenly strikes the ground and a bright light comes out from the spot. She tells him to grow to the best of his abilities, but when he looks back up at her, she's nowhere to be found. All that's left of her is the bright light, and it appears she had teleported elsewhere. Russell is left awestruck, and he just looks at the spot where she was standing. After he finishes, MC steps out of the professor library and quietly shuts the door, still shocked from the encounter. While he's still daydreaming, he hears a voice from behind who's asking if it's our boy who is standing by the door. Russell looks back at the person talking, and it turns out to be Anton and his gang. Anton's friend wonders why Russell is coming out of the professor's library and asks who he thinks he is. Anton remarks that it seems Russell must have kissed some professor's a-hole, but it doesn't change the fact that he won't amount to anything. The boys walk away laughing, and Anton tells Russell to keep trying his best. As he walks away, he glances back and says that it's not going to do him any good anyway. Shortly after, the students gather in the Academy Stadium for real situation magic battle studies. The first one to be named comes down to the stadium grounds and gets to choose another student to be his or her opponent. The professor in charge tends to choose the weakest student. This is done so that the student can choose someone of their own level to compete against. All eyes suddenly go to Russell, and it seems everyone's expecting him to be called. Russell mentions that he was always the first to be called in his past life. Some boys nearby jokingly gossip that Russell will be the one to be chosen again, because he has a condition known as mana vein narrowing. One of the students immediately starts begging Russell to choose them as their opponent when he's called out so they can raise their grades this semester. Another student tells Russell not to pick that bastard but to pick him instead. The professor notices the ruckus and he tells all the students to quiet down. He proceeds to pick a student and starts to call the first name. Everybody starts to whisper that it's going to be Russell, and some people start to laugh. Much to their surprise, the person called out is Anton Frederick, and this shocks the students. They're shocked to hear Anton's name, and they wonder why he gets to be first. Anton proudly walks by the professor. He thanks the professor for calling him out. But the professor tells him that this is nothing compared to the favors that he receives from the Frederick Merchant Association. Russell becomes alerted and says within himself that he was expecting this to happen. Anton walks to the center of the field and stops to pick one of the students. He looks right at Russell and tells him to come down to the stadium. Meanwhile, Professor Hubert receives an unexpected visit from his teacher, and he says to her that it would have been nice if she had told him she's coming beforehand. It turns out to be no other person other than Daria Stone White. She proceeds to take her seat and says that it's fine. She retorts that it's not a big deal for a teacher to visit her student. Recalling the student she met in the library, the teacher asks him if he gave a child named Russell a professor use library entry pass. Hubert quickly affirms that, and he worriedly asks if the child made any mistake. Daria informs him that he didn't. but it's just that she hasn't seen something so rare and precious in a long while. Hubert agrees with her and says that Russel's mana vein narrowing is an uncommon illness, even on this continent. The master tells him that he's a fool, because she wasn't talking about that at all. Her words shock Hubert, who promptly looks up to know why she said that. She informs him that Russel has managed to overcome his own problem, and Professor Hubert asks her what she means by that. She doesn't speak for a while and continues with her tea. When he doesn't seem to understand what she's talking about, she finally breaks the news and notifies him that the child has managed to make his second circle. Professor Hubert is sincerely shocked, and he wonders how that's even possible. Meanwhile, the two boys take their spot and prepare to spar on the Academy Stadium. Before the game begins, another screen pops in front of Russel. The screen notifies him that the next mission is to win during magic training, and he can receive lowest grade magic stones and have a compartment that can carry things weighing 40 kilolor. Russel is happy to learn he'll be getting a compartment, because this is magic that only the wealthiest mages can use. The compartment allows you to store things, so it'll be quite useful when storing magic stones. While he's still thinking, Anton calls out to him and calls him an insect. The bully asks him if his body is frozen. Anton tells him his only option of surviving this fight is to beg. Our guy just laughs. Suddenly, Russel covers up his entire body with energy and asks Anton if he's talking to him. Anton notices his transformation and wonders if it's what he's thinking. While they're chatting, the professor coordinating the games tells them to move back to their spot in the circle so he can start the match. He recalls the magic that Russel just used and wonders if someone with mana vein narrowneg was able to achieve second circle. But he quickly dismisses the idea because it's not possible. Once the game is started, Anton quickly releases a second circle magic called Flame Throw. He pours out a stream of flames and shoots it right at our boy. Russel quickly spots the flame heading right for him and responds. He quickly summons a shield that deflects the fire. The fire hits the shield and moves upward, unable to penetrate through the shield. Russel keeps the shield in place and continues to endure the stream of fire. One of the professors watching nearby is shocked by his splendid response. The professor anchoring the game watches also and is shocked at Russel's performance. Anton, who has been pouring out flames for quite a while now, quickly grows tired of keeping his arms in place, and he's shocked that Russel is able to endure the onslaught of fire. Suddenly the stream stops because his body needs to regulate the mana he's losing, and Anton starts to curse because the fire has ceased. Our boy notices the stoppage and quickly takes advantage of it because he's been expecting that to happen. Russel also uses a second circle magic known as a fire arrow. He quickly launches the arrow at Anton, who has stopped shooting flames. Anton is shocked to see him use the fire arrow and immediately tries to respond. He starts to wonder if Russel was able to achieve his second circle, and he quickly surrounds himself with a shield to stop the arrow. The arrow smashes into the shield but doesn't reach him. Anton feels the impact of the fire arrow and wonders how an insect like Russel can put up such a fight. While he's still holding the shield to protect himself from the impact of the still burning fire arrow, he notices something else. What he sees startles him. Right in front of him, Russel has already successfully cast a second fire arrow. Our boy launches the arrow at him and doesn't show any mercy. The second arrow heads for Anton's shield, and Russel doesn't give him any breathing space. The professor anchoring the session is shocked and wonders if it's a double casting. The other professor tells him that it's not double casting, but it's more like his casting speed is so fast that it seems like it. While they talk, Russel creates another fire arrow. Anton notices this, and he wonders if making a fire arrow is all that his opponent is capable of. He decides on a secret way to beat him, and he changes his shield structure. He changes his shield into one that's specialized against fire using another second circle magic. Meanwhile, Russel notices the change and smirks because that is what he's been waiting for. Anton gloats about his plan to wait till Russel expends all his mana on his fire-resistant shield, then fight back. Unlike what he expected, Russel cancels the casting of the fire arrow and starts to cast another spell. The fire in his hand disappears, and some strong wind starts to appear. Anton is shocked by the sudden transformation, and he exclaims because it seems his plan has been foiled. Russel uses a second circle magic called a wind arrow and launches it right at his opponent's shield. Anton is struck by the arrow and falls backwards. He's shocked that the insect was able to identify the type of shield he was using and modify his casting. The new professor who is watching the fight opens his mouth wide and wonders if this is the same Russel he knows. Meanwhile, the professor who rigged the selection to pick Anton can't believe his eyes and continues to sweat profusely. Anton groans from the pain of the impact and loses control of his shield. The impact pushes him far back, and he's almost out of the circle. Anger rises in his eyes and he can't believe that such a little runt is beating him. Before he can make his next move, Russel closes in on him and starts to cast another spell. This time our boy casts a lightning spell. A lightning beam comes out of his hand and hits Anton right in the chest, knocking him further back. His eyes roll back and turn white as he groans from the excruciating pain of the strike. He tries to generate fire to counter the attack, but he's too weak. Russell doesn't give him a breathing chance and rushes him again with another attack. He attacks the bully with another lightning strike. The professor who rigged for Anton starts to protest that he doesn't recognize the type of magic that Russell is using and says the match needs to be immediately stopped. Nearby, Professor Hubert tells the complaining professor to take a closer look at what's covering Russell's body so he can be convinced it's really magic. The professor quickly looks at Russell's body and is shocked. He sees a bright aura around Russell and stammeringly remarks that he's using mana like a knight's aura. Professor Hubert smiles proudly and mentions that he doesn't know how he got to do this, but it seems he's found a way out of his problem. Meanwhile, Russell continues to pummel Anton to the ground. He soon stops after Anton creates a comfortable hole in the ground. The students are all shocked by the turn of events, and their jaws almost fall to the ground. The crook professor wonders how this could have happened. While he's thinking, he hears a voice ask him what he's doing. He quickly looks to his side and Professor Hubert reminds him that he's supposed to announce the winner. The crook professor stutters and quickly announces the winner. He loudly declares Russel Raymond as the winner.